Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Carden, and let's get right into some of the breaking news that's been going on. And of course, that is the government shutdown. There are a lot of stuff going on with that. And of course, even though it is back in the news and it has been solved, you really kind of need to know what's going to be going on with this thing. And first and foremost, as you're well aware of, the government shutdown has ended. The Republicans got what they wanted. There is no guarantee other than their mouth saying, oh, we'll look at that now that the government is reopened. And you can bet my bottom dollar the Republicans ain't going to do jack with the Affordable Care Act, the health care, Medicare, and Medicaid. The Democrats put up a good fight. Unfortunately, it kind of ended with them not getting anything other than verbal commitment. And you know darn well, because Mike Johnson's already spoke out about that he's not going to do jack about the affordable health care. I've got a friend, and I mentioned this in my last podcast, his premiums are going to go up $900, and a lot of other people's premiums are going to skyrocket. And that's what the Democrats are fighting for. The Republicans, since most of them are extremely wealthy, they don't care. If it could go up $2,000, it is write a check out and cover it, I'm talking about the Republican citizens. As you're well aware of, the Senate and the House, and including the Democrats, they get their health care for free. Okay, they don't pay anything for it. They get it for a lifetime if they serve so many years in office. So, but your insurance premiums, you really need to kind of look out for that. Air traffic control is going to be slowed to be restored to normal, as many air traffic controllers have quit their jobs during this shutdown, and they can, of course, reapply, or they've already gotten other jobs. And those who have remained are going to, of course, need much needed rest and time off because they've been working without pay. SNAP benefits. Now, the SNAP benefits, this is kind of interesting. A lot of states have already, got their SNAP benefits back in the programs. People are already receiving their SNAP benefits, but many, many others are not receiving their SNAP benefits. And this is a key thing. As you probably heard on the news, Donald Trump, well, he wants everybody to reapply for those SNAP benefits. That's what his opinion is. And it's kind of sad. He thinks every freaking American should reapply for SNAP benefits, and he was hesitant about refunding the whole program, and he still is withholding monies from those SNAP benefits. Can you imagine that every single American that was previously on SNAP would need to reapply for those benefits just because he says so? And because he says there's so much fraud and abuse in SNAP. Now, there may be, I think it's a small percentage, but to force everybody to reapply, every single American to reapply for those SNAP benefits is absolutely insane. They have already been vetted by states. The state level people who, Health and Human Services, they're not stupid. They know how much incomes that these people make. They are tied into the Internal Revenue Service tax returns. They know what people make, and they know who are entitled to SNAP benefits. I have a lot of friends who are on assistance. They're in the lower income levels. So to say that every single American needs to reapply for that is stupid in my opinion. And, things are coming back to normal, but at a snail's pace. Economic job and projected growth numbers may never be seen due to uncollectible data during the shutdown. We also must keep in mind that these tough economic times are House Representatives and Senate. Of course, they all went with their pay totally intact, their health benefits and totally intact, because they get that when they become, eligible to serve in Congress. The House, of course, also recessed for 8 weeks. But upon hearing that there was a deal, Mike Johnson all of a sudden said, hey, I'm going to call the recess over and y'all need to get back to work. Mike Johnson is to me is a dweeb. He purposely kept everybody on recess because he didn't want to get back in, because he knew he had to swear in that Arizona congresswoman who has been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks, and in fact had to file a lawsuit to get sworn in. Now that the House is back in session, and because of that lawsuit, he finally swore her in. And of course, the first thing that she did was sign off on those Epstein Files. And that's going to be my top story, and I'm going to be talking about that in just a moment. So hold on to your hat there. But I've really kind of found that interesting that he did that. To me, that was just ridiculous to hold out Congress, 8 weeks. And then when they did get back in session and the Democrats were, saying, you guys have been gone for so long, they were saying, oh, we were all working hard during that recess with our constituents in our states, and we were doing this and we were doing that. But by God, for crying out loud. It's ridiculous. All right, let's move on to some other news that's going on. And, of course, this also made breaking news. The U.S. Supreme Court declined on Monday to hear a case challenging the constitutional right to same-sex marriage. Hurrah for the Supreme Court for the few things that they are getting right to the American people. This was nice that they did this. The conservative-dominated court, as customary, did not provide any explanation for its decision to reject the case. And if you've been following the news, of course, this is Kim Davis was a former county clerk in Kentucky who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, and had asked the top court to overturn its landmark 2015 ruling legalizing gay marriage. Davis was ordered to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to a gay couple who were among those she refused a marriage license to. She based this on her religious beliefs. Even though Kim Davis has been divorced 3 times, and of course, the conservative court has a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, and Davis's appeal to award had raised concerns among the LGBTQ community that the court, which struck down the constitutional right to abortion 3 years ago, would do the same about gay marriage. Fortunately, they didn't hear the case, so that was a win for the LGBTQ community and their civil rights. Civil Liberties Group, as well as the LGBTQ organizations, hailed the ruling as a win for people's rights for unions as they so choose. And I have to agree with them here. Since the legalization of same-sex couples, they have their rights too. And it gets kind of sad when these evangelical groups, try to go around and push their beliefs on everybody else. Yes, they have their right to believe as they so choose, but so do everybody else. That's one of the things in the freedoms of this Constitution here in the good old USA. You can have your beliefs. You can say, oh, I don't believe it due to my religious beliefs. That's great. Fine. Wonderful. But who are you to push your same beliefs on everybody else just because you think one way? I have a lot of good friends who are lesbians, and they are, and gay people. They are the most wonderful friends. They are the most loving people. And some of them even have kids, that they have adopted. God bless them. And, and I understand some of these states are giving the freedom to these clerk of courts who are issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples that they don't want to do it because of their religious beliefs, and they're giving them power to do so, like Davis here. And that's sad, but then they just go to different counties, a lot of these people, and find somebody that will issue them their marriage licenses. So, it's sad. And in other news that kind of follows along the same pattern, that has happened, and we're going to talk about little Pete Hegseth again, because this falls under his department. 17 transgender Air Force members discharged under the Trump administration's transgender ban are now suing the federal government for revoking their pensions and benefits after their forced early retirement. The transgender members, who served between 15 years and 18 years in the Air Force, are now asking for retirement benefits that had previously been offered to them. And the lawsuit, which was filed on Monday, comes after the Air Force said in August that transgender service members that have served between 15 and 18 years would not be offered the option, again, would not be offered the option to retire early and apply for benefits, a reversal of a earlier decision. The service members who are impacted lost up to $2 million, which were owed to them for their service over the course of their lifetimes. I repeat, $2 million. And they also, their health insurance benefits, according to the GLAD Law, one of the advocacy groups that helped bring that lawsuit, well, their health care benefits have also been lost. A staff attorney with the group, Michael Haley, said their revocation of the early retirement benefits was part of the general cruelty in attacking transgender people, adding that several of the plaintiffs have received orders allowing their retirements and that some had already started the process of leaving the military. Now, these are folks who are going to move on with their lives, have received the okay to do so, and then have that taken away from them. Once again, Haley said, is terrible. A master sergeant in the Air Force with 15 years of service, including a deployment to Afghanistan, joined the lawsuit after having early retirement rejected, saying the military taught me to lead and fight, not to retreat. The transgender service members are asking for the retirement benefits that had previously been available to them. That's all they're asking for. Stripping away my retirement sends the message that those values only apply to the battlefield and not when a service member needs them most. Logan Ireland told the Associated Press. This is just the latest legal challenge against the administration's policies that seek to force transgender troops out of the military. In May, the United States Supreme Court allowed the ban on transgender troops to move forward while legal challenges proceeded. President Donald Trump and Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth have targeted transgender service members as part of their efforts to root out diversity, equity, and inclusion, which did exist in the previous administration in the military. Hegseth and Trump Pentagon Chief Big Hegseth targeted transgender groups immediately once they got into office and appointment as part of their efforts to root out this DEI that they just do not like. So, all right, so let's recap this just a moment. The transgender folks who have been in the military, they do their job just like anybody else. Just because they're transgender, and Pete Hegseth went in and put this thing that you have to put down what you were at your biological birth. There has been absolutely no problems with the transgender and I'm sure there's gay and lesbian people in the military, and now they got to be more closeted than ever before so they don't get targeted. They can fight along the battlefield just like anybody else. This is going back to Pete Hegseth, rah, 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 macho man speech that he gave to all these generals, and a lot of the top brass are also retiring early and quitting. So, you got to, this is just ridiculous, and it's sad to withhold their benefits. They serve just like anybody else. They're a human being just like anybody else, and to take away their benefits to me is absolutely disgusting. But anyway, let's move on with other news. President Donald Trump has pardoned his former personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Of course, this is all back in the news again. His one-time chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and others accused of backing the Republican efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The full, complete, and unconditional pardon of dozens of troop allies are mostly largely symbolic, and the reason for this is a lot of these people were charged on state-level charges, and Trump has absolutely no authority to, pardon people with state charges. Federal charges, yes. State charges, that kind of goes a different direction. And it only applies to federal crimes. And none of the people named in their proclamation were ever charged federally over the bid to subvert the election won by a Democratic Joe Biden. So it's just, he's just, I hate Democrats. It doesn't affect state charges, though. State prosecutors stemming from the 2020 election have hit a dead end or are just limping along. The move, however, it does underscore Trump's continued efforts to promote the idea that the 2020 election was stolen from him, and even though courts around the country and Trump's own attorney general at the time found no evidence of a fraud that could have affected the outcome. It's just Trump being bitter and, throwing his little tantrums like he likes to do. As long as he's in the spotlight and things are positive pointing to him, he rah-rah-rahs all the time, as you're well aware of, and he does this stuff. And, Trump's recent action follows the sweeping pardons of hundreds of other Trump supporters charged in the January 26, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol, including those convicted of attacking law enforcement. Ed Martin, the Department of Justice point man on pardons and a former lawyer for the January 6 defendants, linked his announcement of the pardons on a post on X that read, "No MAGA left behind." I mean, can you believe this stuff? I mean, it's just... It goes on and on and on and on and on, pardons. I think so far Trump has issued more pardons than any former president, especially when he does blanket pardons for like all the January people that that in 2021 that attacked the Capitol. He pardoned every single one of those people. With no just cause. He just pardoned them just because he said they were warriors and patriots and everything else. And I don't know. It's how do you explain this stuff? I don't know. But these pardons, he, as you know, Trump himself is a 34 felony convicted felon, and he can't pardon himself. Obviously, it's not in the Constitution to do that for a president. But he just loves to pardon everybody else, and these people have criminal records. I mean, they were properly prosecuted, they were properly, given their sentences, and if it's a federal offense, he has a right to pardon them. I get that, but one is enough is enough. But let's move on, because speaking of criminal actions and everything else, this guy right here, who is a former federal court for the District of Massachusetts judge, his name is Mark Wolf. Now, Mark Wolf retired, and so he can be outspoken, because he can't do it when he's sitting on the bench about what's going on with the Trump administration. So he was a senior judge in the U.S. District Court of Massachusetts, and he is now making the rounds on network media. He resigned just this past Friday from a federal judicial service. Now, Wolf's resignation is in protest against President Donald Trump, which he elaborated on his opt-in published in The Atlantic this past Sunday. Why am I resigning? I no longer can bear to be restrained by the judges who cannot publicly talk or do so outside the courtroom, so he resigned. President Donald Trump is using the law of partisan purposes, targeting his adversaries while sparing his friends and donors from investigation, prosecution, and possible punishment. So he went on to say that the White House assault on the rule of law is so deeply disturbing to me that I feel compelled to speak out. Now, Wolf was appointed to the Federal District Court for Massachusetts in 1985 by, yes, another Republican, President Ronald Reagan. He served as chief judge from 2006 to 2012. In 2013, assumed a senior status, which allows judges on the federal court to take on a lower caseload while retaining full benefits granted to their age and years of service, which has totaled at least 80. Now, Wolf noted that his resignation does not allow Trump to fill his seat with his own nominee. This is key here. Now that he's outspoken, dang well Trump would try to say, fine, get out of here. I'm going to appoint somebody else that, supports me to that bench. Trump cannot do that. So that's kind of why I think, this guy knows the law. So it's kind of interesting. And former President Barack Obama nominated Judge Indira Tawali to replace him. Now, the opt-in came 2 days later. Now, not let me back up there. Not Mark here, but somebody else that was previously in that same district. That's what I'm trying to talk to you about. Okay. So the opt-in came 2 days after the court announced in a statement that he was leaving his position as a senior judge. So the whole purpose of this is Trump manipulates the district courts I live here in Florida, and you're all well aware of the judge in West Palm that is basically Donald Trump's talking head. She does whatever Trump tells her to do. When he says jump, she says how high. If you remember, during when Trump was being prosecuted, she tried to do stall to get so the case would not move forward. So, Trump wants to control the entire United States legal system and control the media, so everything is in his favor to his liking. And unfortunately, authoritarianism, law and order in this country does not work. And I think, things are going to slowly change here as his term goes on. And I think you're going to be in a surprise in the midterm elections when for all I can see here, the House will be turned back over to the Democrats. The Senate, no. I don't care how hard the Democrats try to fight for the Senate. I don't see much change there. But the House, because the Republicans already have such a slim margin, I think is going to flip. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm not an expert. So what happens there is to be seen, but I kind of have some good feelings about that. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to our top story. And this is going to be kind of interesting because there's so much going on with this. And that top story is going to be, of course, the Jeffrey Epstein things that are going on. Now, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, with the final swearing in of the Arizona Congresswoman who has been fighting to, get her seat, and to the point to where Congress was reconvened, and Mike Johnson absolutely had no other choice. He stalled as long as he possibly could by the marching orders of Donald Trump. He swore her in, and one of her first actions was they immediately took a vote on the releasing of the Jeffrey Epstein files, and it was her vote and hers alone that would carry that over to get that done. So interesting stuff here. So the Jeffrey Epstein files, yeah. So he wrote in a 2019 email to a journalist that Donald Trump knew about the girls, according to documents made public this past Wednesday. But what he knew and whether it pertained to the sex offenders' crimes is still, of course, as you're fully aware of, unclear. And that is because of the fact of the matter is we all know, whoever you're talking about this in the public media, so far, there's no proof that Trump has done anything wrong illegally with the relationship to these Jeffrey Epstein files. His name is all over the place, but that still doesn't mean jack, all right? As still in this world that we live in, everybody is innocent till proven guilty. And Donald Trump has not been found guilty as far as relationships to this Jeffrey Epstein files. Nothing. But what we're trying to work down to is how much did Trump know about Jeffrey Epstein's illegal actions and, trafficking underage girls, and what was his relationship to all that? And that's what these files are trying to uncover. So anyway, the White House quickly accused Democrats of leaking the emails to smear the president. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released 3 emails referencing Trump, including one Epstein that wrote in 2011, in which he told confidant Ghislaine Maxwell that Trump had spent hours at Epstein's house with a sex trafficking victim. That victim, as you're all aware of, we know had committed suicide. She's no longer around. So, the first thing that the Republicans did was release that email, which the Democrats redacted her name, and they put it out there. She didn't know anything about Donald Trump, didn't see him do anything wrong, which is, for what we see, is true. However, she's not alive to say either or. So the disclosure seemed designed to raise new questions about Trump's friendship with Epstein and what knowledge he may have had regarding what prosecutors call a years-long effort by Epstein to exploit underage girls. And as you just heard in the news recently, Trump is now wants the Justice Department to start investigating all the Democrats' names that are on that. And including some former presidents that had a girl in his office. Yeah. And so the Republican businessman turned politician has consistently denied any knowledge of Epstein's alleged crimes and said that ended his relationship years ago. It is becoming more and more clear that Donald Trump knew more about what Epstein was doing with trafficking underage girls, and I'm sure he did. Again, Trump is, I have to keep re-emphasizing here, is not charged with anything in connection with Epstein, nor is he under any investigation at this time for any wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. That is true, Trump was sitting in the Justice Department, after Clinton and some other key Democrat figures that were mentioned in these emails. But, of course, he's not sending the Justice Department after any Republicans, just the Democrats, because now he's starting to get embarrassed. And he's starting to say, this is all the Democrats doing all this. And, of course, this is a bipartisan group that is, unleashing these Epstein Files, just so you know. Just because Trump is now starting to get distracted from things that he's trying to control, this is something he really can't control, other than the fact that he said, I'm going to go after the Democrats who are embarrassing me here. So how far he's going to get with this, because again, any court will tell you, when you start going after selective people, whether you're a Democrat, independent, or whatever, and just like he's trying to do with the past people that prosecuted him, when it's politically motivated, that's illegal. And he's going to have a hard time with that when you get a jury together that is going to see that. And, of course, any prosecuting attorney is going to see that it's going to crumble under them. A good defensive attorney is going to say this is a political witch hunt, why selective people are being prosecuted when other selective people are not. So you're going to have to wait and see what happens in all this. Which brings me to Maxwell, because Republican Jamie Raskin said he learned from a whistleblower that Maxwell is receiving special treatment in prison and the process of filing a communication application. And this is kind of interesting in the news too, because it is becoming more and more apparent when they moved Maxwell from Florida to Texas into a less secure prison facility that in exchange for her keeping her mouth shut or even lying, she's going to get some special treatment. And there's even been talk that Trump I remember my earlier talk about pardoning people. She may at least maybe not get full pardon, but get her sentence commuted to where she can at least get out. Now, the Maryland Democrat detailed the whistleblower allegations in a strongly worded letter that was sent to President Donald Trump, revealing what he says he learned about Maxwell's prison stay. And Trump knew about this, but he's going to play, I didn't know, So CNN has not independently verified all the claims made by the whistleblower to Raskin, the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. According to the information Raskin says was provided to him by a whistleblower, Maxwell's meals have been customized and delivered to her independently, and the warden has awarded her special privileges, including arranging guests to visit with computers, a security risk not typically allowed in prisons, and is sending documents and emails on Maxwell's behalf. For other inmates, mail can take weeks to arrive or is often lost, Raskin said in a letter, which was reviewed by CNN. The whistleblower also said Maxwell was given a service dog in training to play with, and even though inmates and staff are not typically allowed to pet service dogs in training in prison, she's getting them. And she has been escorted to the prison's exercise area after hours by prison guards, according to the letter. The whistleblower told Democrats that one of the top officials at the prison has complained that he is sick of having to be Maxwell's bitch, and the Justice Department did not immediately provide comment to CNN on this story. Raskin also said in the letter that Maxwell is working on a communication application, though the exact contents on whether it's had been submitted has not been immediately clear. I said communication application. I meant to say commutation access. In other words, she wants to get out early. As a result, Raskin is asking President Donald Trump to make Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche available for a public hearing, a request that is unlikely to be met with, resistance. Democrats' position in the minorities. So, even though he wants to do that, it's probably not going to happen with friction and pullback from Trump. So, what information Ms. Maxwell is agreeing to suppress in order to receive such outlandishly favorable treatment is as a federal prisoner and convicted sex offender is to be seen. And Raskin, of course, put all this to Donald Trump, and he is, of course, stalling all that. So, again, if Trump has nothing to hide, why all the resistance? This is what this is coming down to. If he has nothing to hide, why is he backing off? He's now not even talking to reporters when they ask about all these things. He just walks away, but he'll talk about everything else that's favorable to him. Again, if he has nothing to hide, why is Maxwell getting preferential treatment in a federal prison? A person who was trafficking underage girls, who was, Epstein's confidant, a partner. And again, these are just questions. Dude, if you have nothing to hide and this is all transparent, let the people do what they want to do. It's, why are you going to send the Justice Department after Clinton and other Democrats that may have been mentioned in the email, but you're not going to do that with Republicans? Huh? So this is all stuff that you've got to, consider. So, and this leads us to this other thing that's been going on. This just broke like 24 hours ago. Marjorie Taylor Greene. President Donald Trump, yes, indeed, announced again late Friday, yesterday as I taped this podcast, he's pulling his endorsement and support of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican from Georgia, and would support a primary challenge against her, a major escalation of their growing beef after months of the House Republican criticizing fellow GOP members and the commander-in-chief himself. Yes, she has been outspoken. I don't know if there's any behind-the-scenes reasons for this, but Marjorie Taylor Greene in this past month has flipped 180 degrees from, kissing Donald Trump's hind end to becoming an outspoken critic about the same, especially with the Jeffrey Epstein Files. And he typed in big, bold letters on Truth Social, his little platform he likes to use. I am withdrawing my support and endorsement of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of the great state of Georgia, Trump wrote on Truth Social, adding that despite his record, all I can see wacky Marjorie do is complain. Trump said in the post of Greene's, she's a ranting lunatic and that she has gone far left. The unendorsement came days after a discharge petition to force a vote on a bill directing the Department of Justice to release files related to the Jeffrey Epstein got enough signatures, again with the help of that Arizona Congresswoman, to succeed. Greene was one of the 4 Republicans to sign on in spite of fierce objections of Trump. And Trump was making all these behind-the-scenes calls before this got released, too. Not only Marjorie Taylor Greene, but some other key Republican people that in past have supported him. But like I said, 4 Republicans did flip to sign on to this. Greene's split from the president, as she once admirably supported, started months earlier after Trump discouraged Greene earlier this year from running for statewide office in Georgia, which Trump confirmed in the Post. Stephanie Miller confronts, she was one of them too about the email. So anyway, it seems that it all began when I sent her a poll stating that she should not run for senator or governor. She was at 12% and didn't have a chance unless, of course, she had my endorsement. Trump thinks that if you don't have my endorsement, nobody can win. Yeah, and of course we showed, this past elections with all the governors and stuff, that's not necessarily true anymore. And this is why, you've got to look between the lines. Trump's endorsement capabilities is becoming less and less important. Just so you know. He said she has told many people that she is upset that I didn't return her phone calls anymore. But with 219 congressmen, women, and 53 U.S. senators, 24 cabinet members, almost in 200 countries, and an otherwise normal life to lead, I can't take a ranting lunatic's call every day. But he can find time to go play golf at Mar-a-Lago here in Florida and fly the Air Force One back and forth consistently at taxpayers' expense. He's got time to do that, but he does not have time to chat with Marjorie Taylor Greene because it's negative stuff, and he doesn't like negative stuff. So you got to look at this with a fine grain of salt. No, Greene, in response on X, said that Trump lied about me. I haven't called him at all. She shared a text message with that she sent Trump early on Friday, encouraging him to lean into the Epstein Files issue, noting former President Clinton's connections to Epstein. Apparently, this is what sent him over the edge, the Epstein Files. And, of course, he's coming after me hard to make an example and scare all the other Republicans before next week's vote to release the Epstein Files, Greene said. But really, most Americans wish he could fight this hard to help the forgotten men and women of America who are fed up with foreign wars and foreign causes and going broke trying to feed their families and are losing hope of ever achieving the American dream, she added. Again, you can see where this is all going. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for whatever reason, has flipped a little bit from being far right to become, going into the middle a little bit. Good for her. And yes, she was pissed that Trump wouldn't support her for a Senate race. She was deeply hurt by that. And so, and just so you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene has said over and over and over again, I am not going to switch to the Democratic Party. I still believe in Republican principles. I still support the president on most key issues. She said, but as a woman and a female, this stuff with the Epstein Files has got to be brought out to the public and has got to be investigated. And she has said that. And, she still has, from what I've seen polling, a lot of support of the state of Georgia behind her. And it is true that, if she ran for the Senate, her odds of winning aren't really strong there. Polling is polling. Now, that doesn't mean she still might not run. She basically could. It's just like AOC is kind of looking at the Senate as well. And she's very popular in New York. Marjorie Taylor Greene is still very popular in Georgia. So we'll just have to wait and see how this all comes down the wire. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess. That's all I can say about that. So anyway, let's kind of move on. Marjorie Taylor Greene, though, is somebody that you all need to kind of watch here in the news in the upcoming weeks to see what happens here. So the Justice Department on Thursday sued to block new congressional district boundaries approved by California voters last week, joining a court battle that would help determine which party wins control of the U.S. House. So if you haven't been following that, because Prop 50 passing, with the state of California, now Trump wants to have the Justice Department sue the state of California because it did pass. Now he's nervous. So the complaint filed in California's federal court targets a new congressional map pushed by Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom in response to a similar Republican-led effort in Texas backed by President Donald Trump. Yeah. So anyway, let's take a look at this. So it sets a stage for a high-stakes legal and political fight between the Republican administration and the Democratic governor, who is seen as likely a 2028 presidential contender. California's redistricting stream is a brazen power grab that tramples on civil rights and mocks the democratic process, Attorney General Pam Bondi said in an email statement. Pam Bondi is also becoming, kind of a joke there, because if she does not do every single thing that Trump says to do, he gets mad at her and he publicly, will slam her. So now she goes back to this and says, okay, now we're going to go out to the state of California for Prop 50. But she's not going to go after the state of Texas, which did the same damn thing. They redistricted their area so they can get more Republicans in. So the Democrats are now fighting back. And California is a large state where they can do this, and some other states. And so Trump tells Pam Bondi, go after him. We can't have this. We might lose the midterms. So, now she's going to say all this crap, Governor Newsom's attempt to entrench one-party rule and silence millions of Californians will not stand. But it can stand in the state of Texas, though, according. California voters overwhelmingly approved that Prop 50, a constitutional amendment changing their congressional boundaries to give Democrats a shot of winning 5 seats, now held by Republicans in next year's midterm elections. So that's all they need, 5 seats. And the Justice Department is joining a case challenging the new map that was brought on by California Republican Party last week. The Trump administration accuses California of racial gerrymandering in violation of the Constitution by using race as a factor to favor Hispanic voters in the new map. That's BS, too. It asked a judge to prohibit California from using the new map in any future elections. It's not going to happen, folks. This was passed by the California people by a huge margin. I don't think Pam Bondi stands a chance in hell. You can go through some courts and, kind of get this taken care of, but it's not going to go very far, I don't think. Like I said, they did this in California. That was perfectly fine, but they can't do it in California. I don't think so. So anyway, let's move on to one of our final stories here. And yes, Chip Roy is in the news. And who's this guy? Well, Representative Chip Roy has said he intends to bring a legislation that would freeze immigration entirely until the country sorts out what he described as a cultural problem. The representative discussed the legislation on conservative commentator Benny Johnson's podcast, The Benny Show, on Wednesday, saying it would halt all immigration, including ending House Bill 1B visas, until a certain objectives are achieved. We're dealing with a cultural problem of who we are as Americans, he has said. Now, can you imagine this stopping all immigration totally? Now, we all know that large corporations like Amazon and others use a lot of immigrants which have large, technology background for their companies. So the large factories and corporations that need the technology, that would be okay. But for those who just want to come in here just to kind of get in the country, even legally, that's what Chip Roy wants to stop. Stop all immigration. Nobody can come back into the United States or even come in here for the first time. No. Stop all immigration. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard from anybody. So, to say I'm going to stop all immigration. So, all right, folks, that is my show for today. I want to thank you for joining me on the Right Has Left podcast. Until next week, you try to have a good week. Take care.